wanna be a winner, then I'ma grow up to be a go-getter. Blood, sweat, and tears written in the blacks of kings, 1 in a million, the billions ahead.
Hello and welcome back to TechRadar. My name's Vjestica and you're joining us today for the Xbox Series X review. This review has been written by Vic Hood, our games editor, and Nick Pino, our home entertainment editor, and of course me, TechRadar's senior staff writer. So let's jump in. The Xbox Series X isn't an essential purchase, at least not right now, but that isn't to say it's not a fantastic piece of hardware with a lot of potential. The next-gen Xbox is super fast, surprisingly quiet, and delivers the kind of performance that we've previously only seen from high-end gaming PCs. It ensures that games, both old and new, look and perform better than ever before. Gaming PCs though, never come at this price tag for the same specs, and the Xbox Series X manages to pack a lot of power for under $500. The result is a console that's not only technically impressive, with drastically reduced load times and significantly improved visual fidelity in games, but one which employs numerous quality of life features to make your gameplay experience more pleasurable. However, while the Xbox Series X's raw hardware power is hard to deny, and its new time-saving features are certainly welcome, it lacks in some critical areas. The launch lineup is disappointing, lacking any must-have exclusives or brand new titles that will make you want to run out and buy the new Xbox on day one. To truly get the most of the Xbox Series X at launch, we advise picking up an Xbox Game Pass subscription that enables you to access hundreds of games for a monthly fee. We found it helps soften the blow of this poor launch lineup, though this will see you playing all the titles on your new console rather than brand new games, even if some are optimized. The lack of Halo Infinite or any other big hitting Xbox exclusives is very noticeable once the novelty of the new hardware wears off. In addition, we'd like to have seen more of an overhaul of the dashboard and UI to really drive home the fact that this is a whole new generation of consoles. The Xbox Series X is priced at $499, a lower spec digital only version of the console. The Xbox Series S is also available from November 10th, priced at $299. While this isn't exactly pocket money, it's pretty decent price for the new Xbox. It's the same price as the Xbox One was at launch and matches the MSRP of the now discontinued Xbox One X, both of which are nowhere near as powerful as the Xbox Series X. Considering that the Series X has specs similar to a gaming PC, the $500 mark is pretty good going. You'd be hard pressed to find a gaming PC at this price tag. It's worth pointing out that the Xbox Series X is also available on Microsoft's Xbox All Access subscription service in select regions, including the US, UK and Australia. Xbox All Access bundles together the console with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate on a 24-month plan. At a price of around $35 a month with no upfront costs, this feels like a very good deal. The design of the Xbox Series X is a major departure from its predecessors. The upright tower design is more reminiscent of a desktop gaming PC, although you can position the console horizontally too. Measuring in at 15x1 by 15 by 30.1 centimeters and weighing in at 4.45 kilograms, the cuboid-shaped console is matte black all over, apart from a green hue inside the indented cooling vents on the top. This creates a clever optical illusion and it really elevates the console's design. The design of the face of the console is pretty straightforward, with the signature Xbox power button on the top left, a disk drive, and on the bottom left there's a USB 3.2 port and a pairing button, which also acts as an IR receiver. The back of the console has some cooling vents as well as a HDMI 2.1 out port. There's 2 USBs, an Ethernet port, and there's also a new storage expansion slot, which we'll talk about later. An interesting accessibility feature on the back of the console is that all the ports have tactile indicators. Basically, they're little dots on the back which help you determine which ports are which if you're feeling around the back and you don't know what you're looking for. The sides of the console when it's upright are blank, save for a discrete Xbox logo in the corner of the left-hand side. There's also 4 rubber pads on the right if you want to lay the console down horizontally. On the bottom of the console is also a slightly elevated disc-shaped stand, along with some more vents for cooling. As mentioned, the top of the console is designed to help with ventilation, and this is where the Xbox Series X exhausts any heat it generates. Weirdly, you can't remove that bottom stand, so it does look a little bit awkward when it's placed on its side. The console itself looks minimalistic, sleek, monolithic even. Despite its weight and fairly large size, it looks considerably smaller than its measurements would suggest. We found it slotted with ease into an IKEA Kallax shelving unit. Those are 39cm by 39cm, and when orientated either horizontally or vertically, it comfortably blended in with its surroundings. The Series X design is something you'll either love or hate then. We found it a welcome change from the low-profile Xbox consoles of the past. It's sleek, modern, and it looks like something a grown-up would actually want to own. It's a nice evolution from the flat but compact One S and One X models. Still, the matte black design does mean the console could be scratched easily, and it also picks up fingerprints too. A major upside of the Xbox Series X is just how quiet it is. We've almost become accustomed to consoles revving up like they're about to take off when running games that really put them through their paces, but the Xbox Series X is the quietest Xbox we've ever had the pleasure of playing on, even if we need more next-gen specific games to truly make this call. When you're on the home screen, the console puts out around 30 decibels of sound. That's about the audio level of a whisper, and this changes very little when you actually load up and play games. When playing Sea of Thieves, No Man's Sky, or PUBG, we found the noise never exceeded 33 decibels. That said, when installing a larger update, we did record a slight uptick in sound. Even then, it was never too loud and it barely registered over the sound of actually playing a game. This was also the case when playing the next-gen titles we've sampled so far. While the external design of the Xbox Series X is a considerable departure from the past, the console's UI and dashboard have undergone more subtle changes. The Xbox Series X dashboard is pretty much the same as the Xbox One's. The main reason for this is Microsoft rolled out a meaty update to the Xbox One back in August to make its UI more streamlined and to converge it with that of the Xbox Series X. That means the Series X UI still has a tiled layout that you may be used to with customizable pins, so you can choose which games and apps you want to see first on your home screen. There's a lot of customization on offer, and it's quite nice to have a familiar UI that you've used before. However, because it feels the same, it kind of takes the next-gen gloss off things. The Xbox Series X dashboard is quicker to navigate than previous two, but we did find that there was some popping issues when content was being pulled in from the internet. The Xbox Series X is an absolute powerhouse, rocking an 8-core AMD Zen 2 processor running at 3.8 GHz. It's also got a custom RDNA 2 AMD GPU that puts out 12 teraflops of processing power, throw in 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory and a 1TB custom NVMe SSD, and you've got a pretty powerful machine. But what does that mean in terms of real-world performance? Well, for a start, the Series X is super fast thanks to its new SSD. We've seen the Xbox Series X dramatically reduce load times in games compared to how they would run on Xbox One. The Xbox Series X always loaded quicker, in some cases by a few seconds and in others almost halving the load time. While some titles benefit more than others from faster load speeds, a saving of even a few seconds is always welcome. While some games such as Ori and the Blind Forest always loaded fairly quickly, games like Sea of Thieves is where you really see the power of the SSD come to light. We saw load times cut down from 100 seconds to just 35, and it makes a huge difference. The Xbox Series X supports 4K, 8K resolution and 120 FPS. While 120 FPS feels great in games like the Falconeer, you may not notice as big a difference if you're jumping from 30 FPS as you do to 60 FPS. To get these higher frame rates, some games will often drop their resolution to achieve this. So for example, if you want 120 FPS in the Falconeer, the resolution will drop to 1080p. It's a compromise then, but if you really prefer smoother performance, it's the best case scenario. Not all titles will drop their resolution though. Gears 5's multiplayer allows for 4K at 120 FPS thanks to Xbox Series X optimization, and the result is a visually impressive, super smooth experience. It's a huge upgrade over the Xbox One version. Much like the Xbox One, the Series X has HDR support, although now, thanks to Auto HDR, games from the past will look better than ever. Microsoft's new AI algorithm manages to insert high dynamic range into certain titles, giving them more pop and visual fidelity than ever before. It's an impressive piece of technology, particularly for those who like playing older games. The Xbox Series X's 1TB SSD translates to 802GB of usable storage. That means 198GB are reserved for system files on the Xbox operating system. We were able to download around 18 games of varying sizes before having to utilize the console's expandable storage. That's still a lot of games, but if you want to have everything available and ready to access, we'd advise picking up the Seagate Storage Expansion Card. The Seagate 1TB expansion storage card works exactly as you'd hope. Basically like a mini memory card like you remember, you stick it into the back of the Xbox Series X in the storage expansion slot, it recognizes it, and then you have 900 gigs or so to store extra games. It doesn't come cheap however at $219, but we found it extremely easy to use. The benefit of this as well is because it matches the internal drive of the Xbox Series X, you can access all the features that the SSD provides. If the expansion storage card runs a bit expensive for your taste, you can always attach an external HDD or SSD via the console's USB 3.1 port. However, it is worth noting that these can only play Xbox One backwards compatible games, with the SSD allowing for faster loading times. If you do want to play optimized titles or games that only work on the Xbox Series X, they will need to be stored on the SSD. The The Xbox Series X controller may look the same at first glance, but honestly, it's quite different. For a start, the gamepad's exterior now sports a matte finish that closely matches the console's design. While this certainly looks sleek, it does come with a few drawbacks. The black controller we noticed picked up a few scuffs and scrapes along the way, and when you're going to be using it for a period of time, it's not exactly going to keep itself in mint condition. On the surface though, the Xbox Series X controller doesn't look too different. The shape is similar, the buttons and the layout, but on closer inspection you'll notice it's been changed ever so slightly. The triggers are shorter, the bumpers have been more refined, and basically it means that the controller can be used by the 3rd to 95th percentile of hand sizes, opening up a more comfortable experience to millions of new users. Perhaps the most notable change though is the share button and the hybrid D-pad. The share button works exactly as you'd expect. You press it once to take a screenshot and you hold it down to capture video. The hybrid D-pad on the other hand aims to provide a middle ground between the Xbox One controller's classic D-pad and the Xbox Elite Wireless Controller Series 2's. It's more circular in nature now, but it's quite loud. However, we did enjoy the tactility it provides with each click. Not much else has changed. There's a Type-C charging port now on the rear of the controller, however it does still use batteries. If you want to connect it to a PC or your Android phone, it does support Bluetooth. Perhaps one of the most welcome features of the Xbox Series X is Quick Resume. The purpose of Quick Resume is to allow you to continue a game from a suspended state pretty much instantly. So within seconds you can jump back into the game where you left off, as if you never stopped playing, without having to sit through loading screens again. Not only that, but you can jump between multiple games at a time which have been left suspended. We found that we could seamlessly jump between gameplay in a matter of seconds as long as the games you're hopping between have already been booted up at some point beforehand. We're able to jump from being in a Timber Yard as Alan Wake to being Alison Ronan in Don't Nods Tell Me Why within 11.4 seconds by pressing the Xbox button on the controller and selecting the game from the sidebar. That's from gameplay to gameplay, no loading screens. If we wanted to access Tell Me Why from the Xbox dashboard home screen, selected as the current game we were playing, the time for the dashboard to gameplay was around 2.7 seconds. Microsoft hasn't said if there's a limit to the number of titles that you can have in a suspended state at one time. It seems to vary game by game, but we did find that up to 5 or 6 is when the game would start replacing itself with the latest title we opened. Of course, online multiplayer games work a bit differently to other titles. It's not feasible to allow players to suspend mid-play during online gameplay, or we would just have a bunch of AFK players on the servers. So for example, if you're a mid-game in Sea of Thieves and then decide to jump into another game, you'll be removed from the game, but you can quick resume from the title screen. Another of the Xbox Series X's best features is the breadth of its backwards compatibility. There are well over 1,000 backwards compatible titles available, meaning you'll be hard pressed to find an older game you have which isn't supported on the Series X. As mentioned previously, we found these titles loaded faster and simply play better. Improved stability means fewer frame rate drops, which makes older games feel nicer to play, even if they're otherwise a little outdated by the standards of modern blockbusters. This backwards compatibility also extends to Xbox accessories. We found that we could easily connect the original Xbox Wireless Controller and the Xbox Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 to the Xbox Series X with no issues, and we were also able to connect our headsets. Any officially licensed Xbox One accessory that connects either wirelessly or via a wired USB connection should work on the Xbox Series X too. However, it's worth noting that optical port connections aren't supported, although some of these products may work with a firmware update. Xbox Smart Delivery aims to allow players to always have access to the best possible versions of an Xbox game, whichever console they're playing on. Essentially, it's a bit like forwards compatibility and backwards compatibility combined. We found that we could access games that we already owned on Xbox Series X on the Xbox One S without issue, and without having to purchase two versions of the same title. So for example, we could play the Falconeer on Xbox Series X with its optimizations, and then jump onto the Xbox One S and continue playing the game there, just without the Series X optimizations. The Xbox Series X also offers a range of multimedia features. For one, the console boasts a built-in 4K Blu-ray player that's simple to use. Microsoft is also the only next-gen console maker to support Dolby Vision, a more exacting HDR format that allows for superior contrast and color accuracy. In terms of content, you can watch shows and movies in Dolby Vision with Netflix, if you shell out for the premium subscription tier, or via a Dolby Vision 4K Blu-ray. The advantage that Dolby Vision has over standard HDR10 is that it supports 12-bit color, enabling the console to display more than 68.7 billion colors, far more than the 10-bit HDR format could show. Of course, how good these colors will look ultimately depends on your TV, which also needs to support Dolby Vision 2. While the default headphone settings for the Xbox Series X is Windows Sonic, a type of spatial audio format, the Xbox Series X also supports Dolby Atmos and DTS Headphone X sound, though you need to purchase a separate license for each of these. Windows Sonic is fine for those who aren't too fussed about their audio quality, but Dolby Atmos and DTS provide a fuller spatial sound experience, meaning, for example, that you can tell from an enemy's footsteps exactly where they are in relation to you. If you're someone who plays a lot of online multiplayer, then it could be worth picking up one of these, especially if you don't need a specific headset for either to work. It's also worth noting that Dolby Atmos is only really optimized in games that support it, same with DTS sound. These include the likes of Gears 5, Forza Horizon 4 and Rise of the Tomb Raider. At the time of writing, the new Xbox app for iOS and Android is still in beta testing. The upgraded version of the companion app gives you more control than before, allowing you to specifically manage storage across your Xbox consoles, voice chat with friends on either Xbox or PC, and easily share clips and screenshots from your games. You can even remote play, which is a really handy feature, particularly if you're an iPhone user, because unfortunately, you can't cloud game on there at the moment. The Xbox Series X launch library is perhaps what lets the new console down the most. For a start, there are only a handful of new big name games landing on the console at launch: Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, Dirt 5 and Yakuza Like a Dragon, none of which are Xbox exclusives, although Yakuza won't be coming to PS5 until next year. In fact, every Xbox Series X launch game is already available or will be available on Xbox One, and many will release on PS5 too. The launch titles that are Xbox exclusives, such as Gears 5, Forza Horizon 4 and Ori and the Will of the Wisps, are all optimized versions of Xbox One titles. During our review period, we had access to both backwards compatible Xbox titles and a handful of next-gen games which have been optimized for the Xbox Series X. However, optimizations for some of the third-party titles we had access to, such as Watch Dogs Legion, hadn't been rolled out in time of writing. Optimization patches for many of these titles, including Watch Dogs Legion, are scheduled for the Xbox Series X's launch date on November 10. We found that while we enjoyed new games such as Yakuza and were impressed by the optimizations for Gears 5 and Gears Tactics, there were no games that really blew us out of the water and made us feel like the Xbox Series X should be a day one purchase. It's a bit of a disappointing selection then, which would have been bolstered significantly by Halo Infinite, which has now been delayed until 2021 and maybe beyond. We're hoping that we see Microsoft pad out the Xbox Series X games lineup in the future, but it's not a particularly strong start. The saving grace in terms of the games available is that Xbox Series X players will have access to thousands of backwards compatible games at launch, so you'll have plenty of older games to play. If you're picking up an Xbox, we would strongly advise picking up Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, like we said earlier, to bolster your game library. As previously mentioned, Xbox Game Pass means you get access to hundreds of Xbox One games off the bat, including first-party Xbox games on day one. So, in terms of money saving, pairing your Xbox Game Pass subscription with your new console means you won't have to shell out for brand new games, unless they're not included on Game Pass. Even when they are, there's a 20% discount, and you can also get a 10% discount on DLC. A handful of Xbox One games have been optimized for the Xbox Series X. These titles have been upgraded or built with the Xbox Series X in mind in order to make the most of the console's power. Boy, do they show it. We tested a few optimized titles including Gears 5, Yakuza Like a Dragon and The Falconeer, and found that these games boasted minimal loading times, improved stability and considerably enhanced visuals. For example, Gears 5 on Xbox Series X boasts ray tracing and 4K at 60 FPS, making the campaign mode look better than ever before, and it also loads faster. It's immediately more immersive thanks to more stable frame rates and a lack of loading screens. The difference is even more noticeable in Gears 5's multiplayer, which allows for 4K at 120 FPS, resulting in a buttery smooth performance that feels much more responsive, and which is critical in online multiplayer. With Dolby Atmos support as well, the game is a brilliant showcase for the Xbox Series X's unbottled power. So should you buy an Xbox Series X at launch? Well, we believe you should buy it if you want minimal loading times and smoother gameplay, you want a great audiovisual multimedia experience, you want to keep access to your older Xbox games and accessories, and you want more control over your storage. Don't buy an Xbox Series X, however, if you want an exciting launch library, don't have a 4K TV, or you're expecting a full next-gen UI overhaul. So thanks for watching our Xbox Series X review. If you did enjoy the video, give us a like and don't forget to subscribe. And which game are you going to be playing first when Microsoft's new console arrives? Let us know in the comments below.